Snowtown, located 145 kilometers north of Adelaide, has become synonymous with the killings. However, it's crucial to note that the victims were not from Snowtown, and the bodies were temporarily stored in various locations around Adelaide before being transported there towards the end of the crime spree. Only one victim was murdered in Snowtown itself. The discovery of 8 bodies in plastic barrels within the disused bank vault on May 20th marked a turning point. Subsequent investigations revealed 2 bodies buried in a backyard in Salisbury North. By the end of June, 9 of the 10 victims had been identified. The breakthrough came after a prolonged, covert investigation by the South Australian police. 2 previously unexplained deaths were linked to the Snowtown killers. 4 individuals were apprehended and charged in connection with these gruesome murders. All were found guilty, either as the perpetrators or accomplices. John Bunting played a significant role as the mastermind behind this group. Due to numerous suppression orders, many of which remain in place, the vast majority of the case details are not available to the public. Individuals involved in the murders. John Bunting, convicted of murdering all victims except Suzanne Allen, considered the central figure and motivator, may exhibit psychopathic traits, lacking empathy and deriving satisfaction from control. Robert Wagner, befriended by Bunting in 1991, assisted Bunting in the murders. Mark Haydon, not convicted of murder, pleaded guilty to disposing of bodies. James Vlassakis lived with Bunting and gradually became involved in the crimes. Became the Crown's key witness. Elizabeth Harvey, Vlassakis' mother, knew about the murders and assisted in one. Died of cancer after the arrests. Thomas Trevelyan assisted in the murder of Barry Lane, murdered by other participants before police involvement. Jodie Elliott, sister of Mark Haydon's wife, impersonated Suzanne Allen to collect Social Security payments. In 1991, John Bunting established residence in Salisbury North, where he swiftly forged friendships with Wagner, his partner Barry Lane, and Mark Haydon, who resided in the vicinity. Bunting's victims were often selected arbitrarily based on perceived offenses. He harbored a particular animosity towards pedophiles, and several victims were targeted due to Bunting's suspicions, often founded on unsubstantiated rumors or flimsy evidence. Others were killed out of disdain for obese individuals, drug users, or homosexuals. The majority of victims were acquaintances or friends of at least one member of the group. Some were relatives, occasionally residing in the same household as the perpetrators. Others were briefly befriended and lured into the group, serving as convenient targets for Bunting's murderous impulses. Typically, the victim's Social Security and bank account information was acquired, allowing the killers or their associates to impersonate them and continue collecting their pensions after their deaths. While approximately $97,200 was obtained through this method, financial gain was not deemed the primary motivation for the killings. The final murder occurred within a bank building where the barrels containing the victims' remains had been relocated for storage. Describing the scene encountered in the building, a Snowtown officer remarked, "It was a scene from the worst nightmare you've ever had. I don't think any of us were prepared for what we saw." The building was strewn with instruments employed by the killers to torture and murder their victims, including sharp-edged knives, blood-stained saw, double-barreled shotgun, coiled ropes, adhesive tapes, disposable gloves, fabric cloths, and variac metallurgy tool for administering electric shocks. There was evidence of prolonged torture tools including pincers, pliers, and clamps. The pathologist's report indicating extensive torture using everyday tools. Victims were forced to address torturers with reverent titles, God, Master, etc. There were specific cases of torture as well. Ray Davies, garroted with rope and a tire iron after being subjected to beatings, genital mutilation, and toe crushing. Frederick Brooks, electrocuted on genitals, burned with sparklers, and suffocated after toe crushing and cigarette burns. Some victims were cannibalized. During the gruesome murders committed by Bunting and Wagner, a portion of the flesh from their 11th and final victim, David Johnson, was cooked and consumed. These are the victims victims they know about. Clinton Trezise, found buried in a shallow grave in 1994, killed in Bunting's living room after being invited for a visit and struck with a shovel. Ray Davies, a mentally handicapped man targeted after an accusation of pedophilia. Harvey assisted in his torture. Davies' disappearance was never reported. Suzanne Allen, a friend of Bunting's, died after Davies and was buried above him in the garden. Her remains were concealed in plastic bags. The jury could not definitively determine if she was murdered. Michael Gardner, an openly gay man killed due to suspicions of pedophilia. Barry Lane, a gay man and crossdresser who had a relationship with Wagner. Lane was tortured by having his toes crushed with pliers. Thomas Trevelyan, found hanging near Kersbrook, initially presumed suicide, involved in the murder of Barry Lane. Killed after discussing the crime with an outsider, diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, easily influenced. Gavin Porter, heroin addict, friend of Vlassakis, moved to Murray Bridge with Bunting and others. Targeted as a victim after leaving a discarded syringe, strangled in his car on the property. Troy Yude, Vlassakis' half-brother, son of Elizabeth Harvey, living with Bunting at the time of his death, killed in the house after being dragged from bed while asleep. Vlassakis' first murder victim, Fred Brooks, intellectually disabled son of Jody Elliott, targeted by Bunting as an easy victim, lured to Bunting's house, attacked, and brutally tortured. Gary Oddwire, disabled man targeted and killed in his home by Bunting, Wagner, and Vlassakis. Elizabeth Haydon, killed by Bunting and Wagner in her home while her husband was absent. David Johnson, Vlassakis' half-brother, lured to a bank building by Vlassakis and murdered by Bunting. The only victim killed in Snowtown. An investigation was initiated after Elizabeth Haydon's brother reported her missing. Suspicions arose due to her husband's conflicting explanations and her unlikely departure without her children. Police investigated Haydon's disappearance, leading to scrutiny of her connections with the murderers. The discovery of Trezise and Lane's acquaintance provided a crucial clue, indicating a more sinister motive and not just a missing persons case. In May 1999, the discovery of barrels containing human remains in Snowtown marked the conclusion of a 5-year criminal investigation. The investigation began with the discovery of human remains at Lower Light, which were later identified as those of Clinton Trezise. To gather evidence, police installed a listening device in Mark Haydon's residence in Smithfield Plains. Recordings from this device were subsequently used in court. The remains found at Lower Light were determined to have been murdered in Bunting's living room in Salisbury North, South Australia. Ray Davies and Suzanne Allen were also found buried in the backyard of that house, and the barrels were subsequently placed in the bank vault rented by Haydon under the alias Mark Lawrence. The arrival of unfamiliar vehicles in Snowtown, a secluded town where outsiders were conspicuous, and suspicious activity at the abandoned bank prompted an investigation of the building. A local police source stated, "As far as I know, no one involved in these murders resided in Snowtown or the vicinity. The victims were killed elsewhere, and the barrels were transported to Snowtown due to its isolation and the availability of a suitable location for the perpetrators." Forensic examiners discovered that the remains were mummified rather than dissolved, despite the apparent intent to dispose of the bodies in acid-filled barrels. The killers had used hydrochloric acid, which had the unintended effect of preserving the remains. Following preliminary hearings, Vlassakis became the first defendant to receive a sentence. He pleaded guilty to 4 murders and was sentenced to 4 life terms on June 21, 2001. During the summer of that year, Bunting, Haydon, and Wagner entered not guilty pleas to 10 counts of murder. However, charges against Haydon were subsequently dismissed due to insufficient evidence. The Supreme Court trial for Wagner and Bunting commenced on October 14, 2002. However, the jury encountered difficulties early on. At least one juror withdrew due to the disturbing nature of the evidence, and some sources indicate that a total of 3 jurors were dismissed for this reason. On September 8, 2003, both Bunting and Wagner were found guilty. Bunting was convicted of 11 murders, while Wagner, who had admitted to 3 murders, was convicted of 7. Both defendants appealed their convictions. They were sentenced to life imprisonment on each count, to be served consecutively. Justice Brian Martin, the presiding judge, declared that the men were engaged in killing for pleasure and were incapable of genuine rehabilitation. Haydon's trial commenced on August 2, 2004, with charges of 2 murders and 6 counts of aiding criminals. Haydon denied involvement in the crimes. On December 19th, the jury found Haydon guilty of 5 counts of aiding in the crimes, but reached no verdict on the murder charges or the remaining aiding charge. Haydon remained in custody awaiting a potential retrial. In May 2005, the Supreme Court dismissed appeals from Bunting and Wagner. In September 2005, the murder charges against Haydon were withdrawn in exchange for guilty pleas to 2 new charges of aiding in the killings of his wife and Troy Ude. An additional aiding charge related to David Johnson's murder was also dropped. The remaining murder charges against John Bunting and Robert Wagner, involving Suzanne Allen, were dismissed on May 7, 2007, due to a jury's inability to reach a verdict. I'd like to take this time to pay my respects to the victims and all the families that were affected by these heinous acts on both sides. You deserve better and are forever in our prayers. May you rest in peace. Conclusion. Severe mental disorders such as schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and antisocial personality disorder can impair an individual's judgment and lead to violent behavior. Aggressive, impulsive, and narcissistic traits increase the risk of engaging in violent acts, including homicide. The reasons why people kill are complex and vary widely depending on individual circumstances. Understanding the underlying causes of homicide is essential for developing effective prevention and intervention strategies. By addressing psychological, social, and situational factors that contribute to violent behavior, we can work towards creating a society where homicides are less likely to occur. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe for more Killa Cliff Notes, and I'll see you in the next one.